Hello. Today we're going to talk about an event that changed history. It was the first ever long-distance road trip in an automobile. You're probably thinking this had to be the first ever automobile, and you'd be right. What is very little known is that the first ever long-distance road trip in the world was made by a woman. This happened in 1888 in Mannheim, Germany. And it was done by this woman here. Her name was Bertha Benz. She's the wife of the inventor of the automobile, Carl Benz. This man here. He was an engineer, very brilliant, and he invented an automobile like this. It's 3 wheels. It's like a tricycle. Big back wheels, smaller front wheel, and they're all bicycle wheels. That's what he used. That's what he found was the best for his first automobile. But this road trip was very, very interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, why is it that Bertha became the first person to ever make such a trip? It just so happens that Carl and his wife and the family, after he invented his car, they would make little tours of the city. They would go to the restaurant around the corner, or they would go across town and picnic by the river. But this car, no one had ever seen before. They had never seen such a machine. It wasn't pulled by horses. It made an awful racket. It was stinky. It smoked. People were pretty upset. And there was a lot of neighbors that complained to the government, to the police. And so it was made a law that Carl was not allowed to drive his car on the city streets of Mannheim. That's it. No more driving. On your own property, Carl, that's okay. But he was not allowed to drive on the streets. But Bertha, she was very smart. She was very clever. And she knew we need to make this thing famous. We need to show the world that this thing is something that can be used for transport, for moving people, for moving freight, for going long distances. So, early one morning in August 1888, she gathered up her 2 sons, and they took the car out the back, because there were guards posted in the front to prevent Carl from driving. They took the car out the back, pushed it down the street, got it fired up, and away they went. Because she knew she was not forbidden to drive. So, here they go. Let me find a picture. Oh yeah. So here's Bertha and her 2 sons taking off early Sunday morning, August 1888. And they drove from Mannheim, this city, to her mother's house in Pforzheim. And this is the tour. This is the actual roads that she went. All the way down here through these various cities, down to Pforzheim. It's a distance of 122 kilometers, which is about 75 miles. Now, in today's times, we think, 75 miles, you drive to Disneyland, it's that far. But in 1888, this was a long distance. People either walked, or they rode a horse, or maybe had a carriage that would carry them. But 75 miles, or 122 kilometers, this was quite a distance. And it had never been done in an automobile. So, here they are traveling early in the morning, and you got to realize, as I'd mentioned earlier, she's driving through the countryside early on a Sunday morning in areas where people had never before seen a car. They'd seen it a few times in Mannheim, but they'd never seen it out in the countryside. They'd maybe heard about it. And here comes this noisy, stinky, smoking machine. It scared them to death. Very many people were terrified of this. They thought the devil was arriving. They had no idea what this was. It was just too unusual. So it was quite an event. But Bertha, she knew from the reactions of the neighbors what it was really like, so she and her sons just tolerated it and kept on going on down the road. And these roads, you also have to realize, there are no paved streets to drive on. All there was dirt roads for horses and carts. That's it. Rutted roads or just wide pathways, that's it. And she herself didn't have this map. She didn't have a map at all. All that she knew was that the train went from Mannheim to Pforzheim. And so, for the most part, she followed the train tracks. Next to the train tracks often, but crossing over little streams, etc. All the way. The other thing that she ran into as a problem is, imagine here you are, you're driving an automobile, first ever automobile, first ever long distance road trip. Put, 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 bang, 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 you're going down the road. How far you're going to get until the next gas station? Oh, that's right. There are no gas stations. There are no gas stations on Earth. So, where did they get their fuel? When she was this far, if I can see this right, she got as far as this town, Wiesloch, little town on the way, and just outside of that town, they ran out of gas. But where Carl and other engine makers got fuel for their engines, because engines had been around for a few years, they used them in factories and such, but they got their fuel from a cleaning fluid called ligroin. And this you could find in pharmacies, believe it or not. Little bottles of cleaning fluid to take spots off your shirt. And this stuff had a very similar chemical composition to gasoline. So that's what she went looking for. And they pushed the car into town, into Wiesloch, and they parked in front of a little not a gas station, a pharmacy, knocked on the door. Mr. Ockel, the proprietor, came out, and she and her sons explained the situation. We need this ligroin for our automobile. Wow, he'd never seen this before. So she bought all he had, which was about 3 liters, maybe about a gallon. And this pharmacy, it still exists to this day. Here is a picture of the outside of the pharmacy. And on the inside, looks like this. It's an old style pharmacy from the 1800s. And this is the actual pharmacy where she stopped for the first time. And to this day, this pharmacy is considered the first ever gas station in the world. Let me break away and I'll let the current proprietor of this pharmacy give you a little talk about this.
Only when the three-wheeled Carl-Benz motorwagen is for filling in front of the pharmacy. Then I will get this bottle and fill this kind of gasoline, it's a low boiling gasoline, into the tank of the three-wheeled Benz motorwagen.
So that's how they got their first gasoline, ligroin. And then they carried on their way. And of course, they did run out of gas a few more times. There was a little town called Langenbrücken. They got some more fuel at a pharmacy in Bruchsal. And then from there, they made it all the way to Pforzheim that evening. I realized this trip, she left about, we figure about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and she arrived 75 miles away about 8 or 9 o'clock at night in her mother's city. And they went and stayed in a hotel that night and visited her mother the next morning. So that was the long-distance road trip that changed the world. Because even though Carl was forbidden to drive, that Berta had the cleverness and the bravery to make such a trip with her sons, it became very well known. People all along the route talked about it, newspapers picked it up, and of course, once she got to Pforzheim, she sent a telegram to her husband and said, "Hey, we've arrived, we're safe." Oh, here's a little factor I'd forgotten to mention. She took this car without Carl's knowledge. So you could actually even consider this was the first ever car theft in history. Nevertheless, she wrote to Carl first thing when she arrived and said, "We're all okay." And newspapers wrote articles about this. It got known. Carl himself became confident that his automobile was capable of making such a trip. And in fact, the next month after she made this trip, they took this car to Munich and put it in a convention for carriages and coaches. And it was the rave. He actually got allowed to tour the city with the car. People were chasing after him. Children were running behind. It was a very exciting, very adventurous thing. And he not only won the gold medal for this convention, he got the large gold medal. They called it the Große Geld medallion. It was so big. No one had ever gotten such a gold medal before for his fantastic invention. And of course, the rest is history.